far behind. So we have to ask ourselves, why is that? And, you know, I can be very frank now, I have nothing left to lose. I've heard so many times over the last 8 years, well, you know, if we keep our taxes low, that'll be a reason for everybody to want to come here. And those businesses will flock to us because we have low taxes. And I say to them, it's interesting that Boulder, who has probably the highest taxes in the state, is thriving economically. So explain that to me. Why is it the argument just doesn't seem to cut it? And I think if we've learned anything in the last 4 years particularly, because I think even the mayor came in thinking, oh, there's just all this waste in the city. If they would just be more efficient, we could do more with less. And the truth is, I think even Mayor Bach will tell you today that we just don't have the resources to provide the services that the citizens expect in this community. So we're going to have to do something about it. I don't know what the answer is. Hopefully, whoever the new mayor is will help us to sort this through. This is a good example when you talk about taxes or raising revenue. It's a good example of getting the citizens engaged. You know, our first reaction in Colorado Springs, whenever a new idea comes out, whatever it is, whether it's a downtown stadium or anything new in Colorado Springs, our first reaction tends to be, no and hell no. Rather than, well, let's think about this. You know, wouldn't that be great for our community? And, you know, maybe not this project just like it is, but let's go have a conversation about this and see how we can make it even better. And so our conversation about taxes is going to require the public support and the public to get engaged. And you know, I would hope that a mayor might even engage the public in the conversation and not just come out and say, here's what we're going to do. Because we've proven with our SCIP program, you know, probably familiar with that we did, I think 20 years ago, because those bonds are coming due next year. We had like 200 citizens that gathered for about a 3-month time frame. And we gave them a list of all the capital infrastructure programs, or all the infrastructure things that need to be done in the city. And they sat around tables for a few months and prioritized those. Were you on this, Gail?
Yeah, I was involved with that, and it was incredible because people had a chance to say, you know, you could pick out, I mean, people tended to pick things that were specific to their neighborhood, but still, I think it gave people a better picture of the entire city. People tend to live in their own neighborhood and just cocoon in their neighborhood, and they forget that we're Colorado Springs. We're not just the North End. We're not just Shooks Run. We're not just the Broadmoor. We are Colorado Springs. We need to figure out the best thing for the entire city, and I hope they can bring that type of thing back again.
That whole sense of that. We'll skip. Yeah. Because by the time, when you do a process like that and engage the public in the conversation and help them create whatever it is you're taking to the voters, you've won half the battle already. Because the public is the one who has already bought into it and helped to create it. And so when you go to the voters, the chances are much better of success. Charles?
Well, I'm on the Parks Board, and we did that for our Parks Master Plan. We engaged, we did pay $175,000 for that, so you can thank me for doing that. But the process took about 1.5 years. Now, I would certainly hope that we would take that amount of time to do that. But we engaged the public online, which your younger population is more interested in online. Randy Williams mentioned doing online voting, if we could get to that and engage our public a little bit more. But I think the process that we did with the Parks Master Plan, we did some, voting basically inside the city auditorium on April 30th of last year. We did a lot of other things, but we can engage, and I think that if we just took that as a way to address things all the way through, I think that
it's proven to work. It's proven. And I think the public just feels a part of it. I have one great story about taxes. If you remember right, I'm not going to say it was one of my biggest mistakes in here, but back in 2008, city manager came to me and said, you know, we've had the economic downturn, and if nothing changes and the fall in revenue continues, you know, Colorado Springs, most of our revenue comes from sales tax. Most cities are more equally split between property tax and sales tax. But because we're more heavily in sales tax, when an economic downturn hits, it just is immediate for us. Whereas property tax takes a couple years for the values to catch up, and it's a much more steady form of revenue. So when the economic downturn hit, our revenue literally just stopped almost overnight. City manager came to me and said, you know, we're probably about, I'm trying to think what the number was, probably about $75 to $80 million short in our budget. And here's what this is going to look like to the city. We're going to lose police officers, we're going to lose firemen, we're not going to be able to take care of our parks, we're not going to be able to mow our lawns. I think you all know where this story goes. And on and on and on. And I said to her, this is how naive I am, how much I believe in this community. I said to her, I cannot in good conscience sit here and allow that to happen to this community without at least giving the public an opportunity to prevent it. So I did a ballot initiative called 2C. And our tagline was a city worth fighting for. I thought it was brilliant, actually.
There were more than a few who agreed with you.
But I spoke to every group I could find in town to try to explain to people that, and we lost, obviously, which meant that all those things were about to occur. The next morning, my email box was filled with some of the most vile emails I ever received about, oh, ha ha ha, we showed you, and how dare you threaten us. And you know, I was genuinely just trying to protect us. It would have cost the average homeowner. I wasn't trying to make money, I was just trying to make enough to prevent the cuts. For the average homeowner, average price home Colorado Springs, it would have been right about somewhere between $150 and $200 a year. And you could have had all those services, maintained all those services. About 6 weeks afterwards, you know, we got so many complaints that we started these Adopt a Park program, Adopt a Trash Can program, and Adopt a Street Light program. I had a gentleman come up to me, and this epitomizes Colorado Springs. Came up to me and just after council meeting and just said, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the Adopt a Streetlight program. Because of you and you putting that program in place, I was able to turn on 3 streetlights on my block, and now we're all lit back up again. Those streetlights, Adopt a Streetlight program, cost $100 for each light for you. That was what it cost. $100, 3 streetlights for a year cost $300. And I looked at him and I said, versus $200, where you could have had it all? And I looked at him and I said, do you remember that little tax thing that was done a few months ago? He looked at me and he said, oh, I would never support a tax increase. So here's a gentleman who is willing to spend more to have 3 streetlights than he was to spend as a community to invest in ourselves. And that one always stuck with me because I think it was a real sense of how people are sometimes only see their neighborhoods, as you were talking about. They only see my street or my neighborhood rather than being able to step back and see the city, and how when we share resources, how much more we can accomplish as a group. I didn't mean to take that little trip down there, really, and that's probably one I want to forget. But it was great.
Well, Jan, I'm thinking on that tax thing, just like with that example that you gave. I think it's hard to think of the whole community.
Right.
You know, I mean, it really is. But I think that's really probably the direction that we need to show leadership, is to think of the community and to think of that's why I kind of like this Neighbor Up thing. It was sort of, it just caught my eye.
Yeah.
There's so many things that you could attend, and when I saw Neighbor Up, I thought, you know, that's a nice idea. That's a good idea. So I don't know if that'll move us in that direction.
It requires leadership, and it requires a voice that the people will listen to, that wants to rally us around something like that. And engage the public. That's one of the keys I've always said. So I think it's possible. I think we're all ready. Between the whole stormwater, the flooding we've seen, the fires we've seen, and now the roads that we're driving on. I had a friend who took her granddaughter up to Fort Collins a couple weeks ago. Her granddaughter's thinking about going to college there. She called me afterwards and she said, it just gives you such a visual. She said, as we drove into Fort Collins last Saturday, I felt like I was entering a gated community.
Oh, wow.
She said there wasn't a pothole in the road, the medians were green, the trees were trimmed, the look of the community was pristine. And she said to me, we deserve it. We in Colorado Springs deserve it. So I think it's one of our most pressing issues, and we have to figure out how to get there. And it's going to require leadership, so hopefully that's what we're about to see in the mayor's run, I hope so. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Ms. Martin, going back to your comment on the desirability of density, does council ever have discussion about disincentives to far-flungedness?
Yeah. Sprawl? No, actually we haven't. We haven't had, it's a big deal for us to start having conversations about infill, because this is the first time we've done that in my 8 years, to talk about how can we encourage more building inside. Maybe one of the ways to do that is to make it harder to build outside. You know, may not even take financial incentives. Maybe just by making it harder to build outside, it automatically pushes people back in. It's going to be a hard sell, because one of our biggest industries in this community is development, and is building homes. And all you have to do is take a drive up I-25 and look out, or come in from Denver, you kind of come down, and you see the sea of homes. And that's where a lot of our revenue is generated from.
And a lot of our costs.
And a lot of, and from a maintenance, from a city services perspective, yes, a lot of the costs. You know, the problem with the adopt a street light, which we don't have anymore, the adopt a park and those kinds of things. Problem with that, and it really concerned me at the time, is you begin to create a community of haves and have-nots when they do that. So that the neighborhoods that can afford to have extra police patrols in their neighborhood or have lights on in their neighborhood, do it. And it's the people who can least afford that, who city services are probably the most important for, can't. And then if you keep that up, you do begin to see this haves and have-nots in the new community. And we really want to avoid that. Mr. Barber?
I would like to reinforce the allure of Colorado Springs in the future, if you please.
Oh,
And I don't know how to do that. I can tell you from my knowledge base is that the nose, which is on the gable of the entry of a house, is no longer there. It was a plastic nose, and it was 2 feet wide and 5 feet tall. It was white. In its place now is an eyeball. Okay. There is a home which has a clown totem in the front yard, and it's going to stay there because CC students and faculty have made it permanent, if you please. But there are other items that stand out in Colorado Springs that are not so whimsical, but yet they carry Colorado Springs residents forward every time you pass that location. And I would like to see some effort by exceedingly creative people to formulate an allure, if you please, and then not force it upon people, not sell it, but just communicate it to others.
Yeah, articulating what that is not easy. But once you come up with it, hopefully your leaders can begin to help spread the word on that. Maybe I didn't really answer your question about what the next 10 years, Gary. I'll tell you what I want is I want
I
a
see
prosperous
you spent
city.
8 years now, just, you know, where we're going as you see it now and where you would like to see it. I mean, I think we all know where you'd like to see it, but
I think we all are hopeful after the elections and with the new mayor, we'll have some new vision and some new direction. And I think we're all hopeful that we'll finally start moving forward. We've spent the last 4 years, I describe it as playing defense. And as council, we never really were even able well enough to articulate what our new job was. And so all we